Today's material, you can see we're going to cover wind heat, heat toxins, nasal and ear, lung, and bee syndrome. Tomorrow we're going to discuss trauma, digestion, gynecology, liver, disturbed Shen, kidney, bladder, eye and vision, and then the tonics. Page 3 and 4 is introductory material that I'll go over. On page 5, 6, and 7 is the actual names of the formulas with the page numbers. So if you go back to this material, you'll go, where's he got that formula, instead of having to rifle through it. Here's the index of every formula we're going to talk about, the 50 formulas. On the last 2 pages, page 58, it says code letters of the herbal companies. So when I talk about a formula, like if you look at page, 8, for example. Page 8 is about yin chow. When I talk about that formula, say the availability, and there'll be a bunch of formulas with code letters on the end. So EG means extract granules. That's the Taiwan-made extract granules from, that's going to be from Sunten, Mintong, Qualiherb, KPC, and all the other companies that do these extracted granules. They all have the same name for the formulas, pretty much. So when I just umbrella them. And then the other code letters you can see on page 58. So if you see a code letter, this is what they mean. This is what they mean. Then complete listing of herbal products. This is a download that you can purchase, and I'll show you that later. That's an 80-page download you can have for $11 on who's got what. So for any problem, gynecological, menstrual cramps, who's got it. And I'll list all the companies and their formulas. I'll show you an example of that, but it's a very convenient way to say, well, I carry golden flower. What do they got for this problem? Oh, I have that in stock, or I need to get that, or whichever company you like. I am not partial to any one company. I think all the companies use high-quality herbs, and it's all about the formulas and the percentage ingredients that are in the formulas. Further reading, for each formula, it'll say further reading. If you look back on page 8, at the bottom there for yin chow, further reading, it'll say Bensky et al., page so-and-so, Chen and Chen, and Ellis. These are 3 bigger volumes I recommend if you want to go further into these prescriptions. Bensky has very good material, and so does Chen. Ellis sums them up in one-pagers, and these are the books that it refers to on page 58. You can see the books that they're referring to. Finally, on page 59 is the codes to the herbal category. So if you look back again at yin chow on page 8, for each herb, there's a letter code. And those code letters on the last page here. So it's just a quick way to say, what's that herb do? These are 30 categories that herbs are put into. So it's just a quick way to go, where's that herb? What kind of herb is that? As far as the ground rules, because we have a tight schedule, whenever I discuss anything, and it's not just discussing the formula, it's really discussing the clinical application of the formula. So when we talk about disturbed Shen, what does that mean? Where does it look like? What are the differentiations? Why would you use one formula versus another? I welcome any questions that have to do with clarifications about what I'm talking about. What I'm most interested in is clinical situations that are puzzling. Now, I can't do cases. You can't say, I have a case and blah, 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 because the case is not in front of us. We don't know this case. I don't know this case. I just know what you have to say about it. So it's not fair to say, well, I want to talk to you about a case, either privately or publicly, because even privately people come up, I have a case. It's usually themselves or a relative. But I'm in no position to do a diagnosis and a treatment. So the kind of questions I'm thinking about is, well, what do you do if? How do you know if it's this or if it's that? Those kind of questions are more interesting. Do you understand? So sometimes in a lecture, somebody will just want to talk about their own experience over and over and over again. It really takes from everybody else. So I've been teaching a long time, and I just don't give that a moment's notice. I just don't go there. So, but otherwise, I want this to be, informative. I want you to go home and have stuff that you can use. You know, you'll know how to use products, when to use products. Now, this is on 50 products. My Who's Got What book must list 1,500 products. That's how many products there are out there. It's nuts. It's nuts. My book has 1,250 products, of which there's 850 formulas. So these 50 today are the most important, you know, the most important formulas. When I say most important, I mean, these are ones I use all the time. And that's why I'm talking about it, because I think they're clinically relevant, okay? My own experience, I've been in Oriental medicine a long time. I started studying in 1974, and maybe before some of you were born. Usually when I teach, we get that. I've been in practice since 78, which means I've been charging since 78. My training was a 7-year apprenticeship with a Korean acupuncturist who did Japanese meridian therapy. I realized that there was a wall with acupuncture, especially with people that were very low in energy. Acupuncture is very good at moving around energy. But if the person doesn't have a lot of energy, it's less effective, you know. So I first started with diet to try to, you know, get diet going. And for me, back in the 70s, that was macrobiotics. And it's very ironic. I'm sure you all know Alex Tiberi, who now lives here. I met him in the macrobiotic community in 1982. I'm going to remind you of that. He wore a 3-piece suit. I had really short hair. You know, I wish I had a picture. But now that didn't work because nobody wanted to do it. So then I got into herbs, and I started herbal training in '82. I moved down to Chicago. I was up in Wisconsin. I moved down to Chicago, and I was very lucky to study with 2 herbalists one-on-one. One owned a Chinatown herb store that I used from Hong Kong, and the names were totally different from Mandarin. And I hung out at that shop often and learned a lot. And then we brought in I was teaching at an acupuncture college in Chicago, and we brought in a teacher from mainland China, and I studied with him for 2 years. I'd studied about 3 years of Chinese in college, and I would help him translate for patients, pretty much. And I learned a lot with that man, Guo Zhenggang. Later on, I was able to go to China. I lived in China for a year. That was in 1987 to 1988, and I studied in hospitals that whole time. Mostly herbal medicine, but also acupuncture and qigong. And my original entry into Chinese medicine was because of Tai Chi and qigong, which for me started before Chinese medicine. And I'm still a Tai Chi qigong teacher. So my experience in China was really life-changing. I wrote the first version of this book before I went to China. I like to say I wrote the first version before I knew anything. The year in China really shaped me, and I was so impressed with what I saw there, and so overwhelmingly impressed. And the hospital I worked in Beijing was 1,500 outpatients a day, 700 beds, inpatients, all with herbal medicine. The acupuncture department in this hospital is very small. So it was all herbal medicine. If you can imagine that kind of delivery system of raw herbs prescribed in the bag for 1,500 people a day, that pharmacy was a zoo, a total zoo. And I was able to visit other pharmacies, other hospitals around the country, and it was all the same. It was all the same. So I studied there. Originally, there were 7 of us. We were all herb teachers. 5 of us knew some Chinese. And we started with 33 teachers, and that lasted for about 4 months. And then more and more of us moved away, and finally there was 2 of us staying a long time. And for me, I concentrated with 3 teachers, mostly because I had good personal relationships with them. One of them was chairman of the respiratory department. One was in the internal medicine department, and the other was head of pediatrics. And it turns out that I studied with them because they were nice to me. But it turns out that ever since, that's what I've been doing. You know, internal medicine, pediatrics, infections is what I concentrate on. I tell people on my website I don't do musculoskeletal problems, which is not true. I do for my own patients when they get injured, but I don't run a pain clinic. And I'm telling you, if you want to make money in acupuncture, run a pain clinic. You can do 3 or 4 rooms at a time, and you put needles in it, some electricity, and you can really make money. The other way to make money in acupuncture is through internal medicine, because then you can sell herbs and supplements. And to be honest, half my income is herbs and supplements. So those are the 2 routes. If you're just going to do acupuncture, try to do multiple patients at the same time, and hire people to take out needles and so on. It's very hard to make a living for 1 patient an hour with just acupuncture. I don't know how you can do it. Right now, I had a nice building with 3 treatment rooms, and always had an intern with me, and I was doing 15, 17 visits a day, and I hated it. I was running around with my head cut off. I couldn't remember if I left needles in somebody. And then the clinic, fortunately, burned down. And I like to say that setting that fire was the best thing I ever did. I moved into my house, and temporarily, you know, we got a room up and going in 2 days. And I have never left. That was 14 years ago. So I have 2 rooms in my house. One's a treatment room, one's a waiting room, and then I have a pharmacy in the basement. And my wife runs the clinic, and it's great. I have a life of Riley. But I'm doing basically 45-minute appointments or 30-minute appointments. 30 minutes if we're just doing herbs and supplements, 45 minutes if we're doing herbs, supplements, and acupuncture. So I'm getting them in and getting them out. It's kind of fast. I wish I had an hour. I wish I had 2 treatment rooms, but I don't. So it's very efficient. And I don't have any interns. I have my dog. So, and he's just not getting it, you know. I thought I had him to take out needles, and that didn't go very far. So I'm going to give up on trying to teach him how to use needles. But the dog's very friendly, and people, you know, the kids love him. I do 35% of what I do. 30% of what I do is pediatrics. And this could be from newborn up to 15-year-olds, you know. I like working with pediatrics. I think it's great. I think a lot of acupuncturists don't do pediatrics, and they should. I think they're scared of it. I think they're scared of managing children. And I set up the Oriental Medicine program at Bastyr College in Seattle, and I was exposed a lot to the naturopaths and functional medicine. And they take pediatrics very seriously. They really see themselves as family doctors and so on, and they like doing children. And the thing about children, I do it because I like children. Julian Scott said, if you don't like children, don't do pediatrics. He's right. You know, I get very entertained by children. And they heal really quick. And mostly what I do with children is acute stuff that's not that serious. You know, colds, coughs, fevers, diarrhea, so on. So families will come in when their kids sick. And I like doing it. It's just general family medicine. It's not very, you know, challenging intellectually, but it pays the bills, and it's a lot of fun. I always like when kids come in. I like working with teenagers who I think most of the problems are because of the parents. You know? And I always empathize with the kids. I do better with boys than girls as teenagers. It's because girls want 1 pill, 1 time to get rid of the problem. They have no perseverance, and they usually just come in for skin problems. It's the truth. And guys, you tell them what they need to do, and they just do it. You tell them the routine, and they just do it. And I like that. But especially navigating the emotional pitfalls of the teen years, a lot of it has to do with poor relationships with their parents. And that's hard to navigate because I can support the kids, but I can't really make the parents do change. You know, I'm not effective at it. It's not my job at the time. But that's the issue. You know, I don't like when parents, you know, pressure children in unnatural ways. You know, they think it's always because they think it's the right thing to do. So they're coming from the heart. They're coming from the head, and it suffocates kids. On the other hand, I'm not into permissive parenting either, where I live in Boulder, there's tremendous permissiveness, and the kids grow up thinking everything's a choice. You know, I've seen mothers with 3-year-olds. Do you want to go into this store? Do you want to go into this store? I'm thinking, why are you asking a 3-year-old what store she wants to go? Just say, now we're going here, now we're going here. Now we're eating this, now it's food time. You know, the lack of boundaries is enormous in younger parents. And the kids grow up thinking everything is a choice. And by the time they're 13, now they're big. And everything's a choice. And parents say, oh, my kids won't listen to me, you know, it's getting into trouble. Or it's parenting from a young age was not very good. Or the kids grow up in a broken home. I'm very old-fashioned. I think broken homes are very hard on children, despite what the fathers always say. Oh, they're doing great, they're doing great. But they're not. Kids always suffer in a broken marriage. Always, always, always. So before you break up a marriage, think 3 times about it. Yeah.
Do you have children of your own?
No, I don't know. I do. I have 2
okay,
children.
Just curious.
Yeah, they're grown.
Okay.
They're very well behaved.
Just curious.
I said to them, I said, yes, I'm a dictator, but I'm a benevolent dictator.
Okay.
Not to share any personal anecdotes, but he's telling the truth. I met him. They're very, very well behaved.
Okay.
Yeah, I said,
They really are.
yeah, they're totally different from each other. The younger one, you know, is very shy and is looking at the floor all the time. I said, Tommy, don't listen to this crap that says don't talk to strangers. That's very rude. If an adult talks to you, you talk to them. You look them in the eye and you talk to them. Just don't go off in a car with them. You know, but I think it's very rude to say don't talk to strangers. No, you got to be polite to adults. And look them in the eye and answer their questions. You know, and say thank you and please. It just opens up a lot of doors. And so then the parents say, your kids are so polite, you know. My 22-year-old who lives in France now, he came home and he says, Dad, is it okay if I go out and see my friends tonight? I said, Rafa, you're 22 years old. Of course. So, you know, why are you asking me? He says, well, I need the car. I said, oh, okay, I get it. You know. No, I have wonderful boys, and I wish I had daughters, and I don't. And I've adopted some friends of ours, teenage daughters, in a sense. You know, they don't live with us. But no, I think kids are great. And I think kids are great. I think mostly so-called problems are problems that aren't their doing. You know, the biggest thing now is ADD. Well, the kid's got ADD. He's Ritalin. Teachers, you know, social workers making their money, trying to be important. Most of these kids who have so-called ADD don't have ADD. Real ADD, it happens in the womb, and it's very hard to treat. It's almost incurable, according to Chinese medicine. It's a fetal damage. And these kids are wild. They're wild kids. They come in the room and they're wild. But kids who get fidgety in school, it's not because they have ADD, it's just because they don't like sitting down for 8 hours and being quiet and being good. You know, they're trying to fit a square into a circle. You know, a lot of kids are kinesthetic. They have to move around in order to make their brain move. So you have to work with that. I mean, about 20% of school children fit into the school. 20%. And the rest don't to varying degrees. And if they're told you're bad, you're wrong, they react, you know, and later on go into drugs and alcohol, you know, because they're told they're not fitting in right. So the school systems can be screwed up in that way. I think there's a lot of wiggle room for the teachers to be, you know, incorporate kids that think differently. You know, it's not, they don't have ADD, they just don't like the program that you're proposing. You know, children should not be on medications. They should not be on Ritalin. They should not be on antacids. They should not be on antibiotics. They should not be on steroids. I really deeply believe that all those drugs harm the body, for adults also. And we have alternatives. We have alternatives. To me, Western medicine is required when a child needs to be in a hospital. Yeah.
Repeat those again, please.
The 4 groups of drugs that people that we have better alternatives for. Antibiotics, number 1 damaging drug to the body. Number 2 damaging drug to the body is the antacids. Number 3 is steroids. And number 4 is mood-altering medications, for children especially, like Ritalin. Now, some people need them. Some people need steroids. I mean, if you have acute rheumatoid arthritis, there is nothing like steroids to get you out of that episode. You know, we have nothing that strong or that fast. You know, if you have an ulcer in your stomach, you're going to need antacids until that ulcer's healed. If you have a real bacterial infection that's gotten into the blood or the organs or the bone, you will need antibiotics. But you do not need antibiotics for ear infection. You do not need antibiotics for a sinus infection. You do not need antibiotics for a cough. Most of those illnesses are viral. You don't respond to antibiotics. They respond because of other reasons. Antibiotics are very cold and they can bring down heat very fast. But if you have confidence in your herbal armory, you do not need those drugs. Giving newborns antacids is malpractice. You know, it's just malpractice. Vaccinations is a whole other story. How many people here work with children? Oh, good. That's great. That's great. Herbal medicine is great with children. You know, it's just great. Works great. Yeah. Is that a question?
Yeah, it is.
What's the question?
Well, the question is, I work with children and I offer herbs, and most of the time the parents are afraid.
Yeah.
So it's like, I feel like I'm treating the parents.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of stuff one has to do to make parents comfortable with it. You know.
So any suggestions around that?
Well, first of all, you have to deeply believe in your efficacy. And the way you do that is clinical experience. I mean, once you know that you can deal with a cough much better than anything that's out there, it's very easy to say, my stuff will get rid of that cough and the other stuff won't. You know, you have websites, you explain in detail, this is what I do. You know, people come to me for chemotherapy, right, while they're on chemotherapy. I do a lot of cancer work. And I said, all right, I want you to take these herbs. Well, my oncologist doesn't want me to take any herbs. Or my doctor says they're dangerous. I say, there's 65 acupuncturists involved. If you want to work with me, you work with herbs. That's what's in China. Everybody on chemo gets herbs. And the recovery rates and their side effect rates are half, you know, double or half. There's no question in my experience that herbs facilitates the whole process, helps them recover from chemotherapy. I don't want to just do acupuncture for that because I don't think it's enough. You know, a lot of acupuncturists will give you acupuncture while you're having chemo. But if you don't want to work with the herbs, find someone else. That's what I say, you know, because I deeply believe it. Now, there are some people that come to me that are getting herbs from someone else. And I said, fine, I'll just do the acupuncture. You know. But you have to deeply believe in herbs in order to prescribe them. And you have to deeply believe in their purity. The purity issue is overwhelmingly pure. Every American-made product uses herbs that have been batch checked. There are no heavy metals, except maybe incidental. They found some small amounts of lead in the old days. It came from cars settling on the plants. There was more lead in the broccoli here than there at the time when they were lead, you know, before lead free. Seaweeds have some heavy metals. So now some of the importers are having problems with the seaweeds. But that's true whether you buy seaweeds in whole food or not. Seaweeds attract heavy metals, and there are heavy metals that the seaweeds are picking up. But the herbs we get are pure. They've been tested. There's no heavy metals. There's no pharmaceuticals. There's no added pesticides. Notice there was some fungicide found in some ginseng, and it's about 10% of what the local broccoli was doing with the same fungicide. But in the main, the herbs are clean. The products that are now made in GMP factories in China are all clean. But we got horror stories, you know, about adulterated cough syrup in Mexico and adulterated milk in China. But the GMP herbs, since 2004, the regulations in China have been much more rigorous than the regulations in Australia, which before that time was what we were using, the Australian GMP levels. America doesn't have these levels. So now if it says GMP from China, they're fine. But every American company, and you look at two companies, Mayway, who makes plum flour, and New Herbs that makes herbal thymes, they subcontract to have their products made in China, but they're made at GMP factories. And at least New Herbs batch tests everything that comes in. They randomly will send a product to an independent lab. And they have what they call certificates of purity on everything that they have, raw herbs and products. Now, if you're buying from the Chinatown herb store, you don't know. They could get it from their cousin in Hong Kong, and you don't know what you're getting. You know, but the GMP factories in China, which are now the big manufacturers, they're all GMP. So it's a non-issue. It's a non-issue. I wrote an article. I write articles for Acupuncture Today. I had an article about nephropathy, you know, herbal-induced kidney failure. And that's a non-issue. That's a non-issue. And you can read that article to look into that. I've had doctors say, don't give Chinese herbs to children. They cause kidney failure. That kind of stuff's really ignorant and abusive because it's not based on any reality whatsoever. You know, there have been some cases of nephropathy in Europe and definitely in China due to the use of some herbs that we just don't use. And now they're so heavily banned from getting into this country in any form that no one could ever have a problem with them. So the herbs are safe. The herbs are very safe, much safer than Western drugs. You know, drugs can count, depending on who you look at, between 100,000 and 250,000 deaths a year. Western pharmaceuticals. So don't talk about safety. No one dies of Chinese herbs in this country. No one ever has. Now, there's been some kidney failure, for sure, because of some herbs that should not have been out there. But you can't get those herbs now, even if you wanted to. They're just not allowed to be imported into the country. Okay. Any other questions? All right, let's look at this, this introductory material. What I will do is what you have, I have. And I will just have it up on the board and you'll have it in front of you with page numbers and everything. I just have exactly what you have. And sometimes I will blue something out. You see that? If I blue it out, I'll be talking about that thing. If I want to highlight something, I'm not going to use the laser point. I'm going to use that blue. So I want to talk about just the overview of Chinese herbal medicines. And first of all, we have classical formulas versus modern formulas. Classical formulas have been written down in some classic, usually before 1911. So in terms of the history of Chinese herbal medicine, our oldest formulas come from the 2nd century. This was John Zhongjing's formulas that were collected into the Shanhan Lung. He never wrote a book called Shanhan Lung. He died with 300 prescriptions, you know, that he had collected and commented on over the course of his life. John has a very interesting life, but basically he was a wanderer and he studied with a lot of herbalists and he wrote down formulas with commentary. But he was in a region of China that really had very few herbs at his disposal. If you look at all of his formulas, there's probably 60 herbs that are used over and over and over again in different combinations. And that's because he was restricted by where he was. People that stick to Shanhan Lung prescribing now, I think it's very antiquated. I think Chinese medicine has come a long way since the 2nd century. And there's no advantage to just being a Shanhan Lung practitioner. I think it's a very old-fashioned focus. And so said, some of his formulas survive in common use today in China. Maybe 10 formulas are commonly used out of all of his 300 formulas. After he died, the formulas made their way to the Imperial Medical School, and they were separated into 2 different texts. One was the Shanhan Lung, which means injury by cold. So John's material was separated into 2 volumes, the Shanhan Lung, which means injury by cold, external cold, and that sort of is the 6 divisions of exogenous attack. And then everything that was for, everything else was put into a book called Jingwei Yaluan, which is gynecology, dermatology, pediatric, internal medicine, and so on. So they were separated, and people were meant to memorize the formulas, and so on. Around the 5th century, those formulas were taken to Japan by Korean Buddhist monks. Japan was exposed to those formulas at that time. And shortly thereafter, they cut off all contact with China and kept the Shanhanlong formulas and the Jingwei formulas throughout their history. It's ironic, in the 15th century, or the 1500s, Japan had a window where they opened up to China again, and at that point in time, there happened to be a Shanhanlong revival, and the Japanese doctors said, oh yeah, they're still doing what we're doing. And then they closed the doors again. So Japan's very much into Shanhanlong. They call them Han Dynasty formulas, which are called the Hanfang. That Chinese Hanfang in Japanese is pronounced Kampo. So Kampo medicine is Japanese herbal medicine. It's basically Shanhanlong and Jingwei medicine. But Chinese herbal medicine really grew after Shanhanlong. Now there was kind of not much happening for the next 500 years, but really a golden place started around the 11th century, Song Dynasty, 1100 Song Dynasty. We started getting a lot more formulas. And most of what we really use today comes from 1500s and afterwards. So probably 75% of the formulas were developed after the 16th century, with 25% coming from before that, in common usage. And that's because the Chinese developed. They're not stuck. They wrote everything down. They printed everything. So all the doctors, all the educated doctors through history had access to the classical texts, and they could see what other doctors were doing. So it built upon itself and developed. That's why I say to just be stuck in Shanhanlong is very old-fashioned. In the 19th and 18th centuries, early 18th centuries, early 1700s, late 1700s, there's a lot more interaction with Europe, and there's a lot more epidemic diseases. Diphtheria, tuberculosis, measles, chickenpox. And so they developed the Wenbing approach, which was the first real approach to challenge the Shanhanlong approach. The Shanhanlong approach was about disease and looked at how disease moved into the interior. The Wenbing approach really talked about toxins, heat toxins, which we know now are viruses and bacteria, and tried to address that. Wenbing was a tremendous step forward in terms of infectious diseases. And when you look at how they dealt with SARS in the last 10 years, it's going back to modifying Wenbing formulas or taking Wenbing formulas. So there's a lot of textbooks. There's at least 600 medical textbooks that have survived, probably more. Each small volumes are very focused. You find volumes just on eye diseases, volumes just on gynecology, volumes just on dermatology. So it's a very sophisticated medicine. The Chinese doctors in China, they study all this stuff. I mean, when you go to the 6-year TCM program in China, you study these medical classes, and they're very familiar with them. In our history in America, well, the Chinese ruined Chinese medicine. It's so absurd. I mean, the best doctors in the world are alive today in China, and they study hard, and they're very clever. And it's just ridiculous, it's just ridiculous. Herbal medicine in China is very developed. In the 1950s, to be honest, the Communist Party rescued herbal medicine. It would have died. It would have been like Ayurvedic medicine. Chiang Kai-shek, who ran the Nationalist Party, banned TCM in 1928. We will be Christian, we will be Western, we will only use Western medicine. But the communists, who were always on the run from 1921 until 1949, they all believed deeply in herbal medicine and acupuncture. The wife of the number 2 guy, the number 1 guy was Mao Zedong, right? Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong. And number 2 guy was Zhou Enlai. And Zhou Enlai's wife was the daughter of a woman who was a TCM doctor. And she wanted to be a TCM doctor, but she never had the opportunity to study. So when her husband became number 2 guy, she got together the institutionalization of TCM hospitals and education at universities. Starting around 1956, they decided that Chinese medicine would be the equal of Western medicine and that they would train both. You gotta understand, Western medicine did not set foot in China until around 1911. And these were done by American Christian medical doctor missionaries who would go, every medical school in China was started by an American missionary. So Western medicine was pretty unestablished when the communists were doing their civil war. And China was in total chaos between 1911 and 1949. It was very hard to get a medical education. So Chinese medicine got very empowered and institutionalized in the 50s. Colleges and universities and hospitals looked identical to each other. Same years of course of practice, same salaries. You went into a TCM hospital or Westside hospital, you couldn't tell the difference until you watched the therapeutics. At this point in time, all TCM doctors must study 2 years of Western scientific medicine. All Western doctors have to study about 8 months of TCM. So they're very exposed. Most Western doctors in China are very open to herbal medicine. They might even go as patients. They would definitely send their parents. They're very sympathetic to it. They understand the difference. Same thing with TCM doctors. TCM doctors have no trouble using lab tests, x-rays, MRIs, immunological testing. They'll do it commonly in the bigger hospitals in order to decide what herbs. I went to a lecture by a GI specialist, TCM herbal. He would do colonoscopies to see the level of inflammation and then do herbal enemas. And then do colonoscopies later to see how it was healing. No problem with that. But he said something very funny. He goes, I was very surprised when I come to this country to see you use anesthesia when you do that procedure. They might be doing anesthesia now. China's becoming very Western, very modernized now. So the demographics in China today is the older people prefer herbal medicine. The younger people will use Western medicine first. If it doesn't work, they'll go to herbal medicine. Pretty much that's how it goes. It's rare the opposite. They usually start with Western medicine, and when it reaches a wall or it doesn't help, then they'll go to Chinese herbal medicine. But if you look at who's giving themselves herbal medicine, either from doctors or from going into drugstores and self-prescribing, 45% of the population is using herbal medicine. And if you're a fan, you go, well, why isn't it 80%? But 45% of China is double our whole population. It's a huge number of people. You know, like 600 million people are using herbal medicine all the time. It's extraordinary if you think about delivery systems, availability. I was contracted by Big Pharma to make a presentation on herbal medicine. And I said, what, are you guys thinking of doing herbs in America? Oh, no. We're interested in selling to China. They had set up an over-the-counter distribution in China, and Chinese didn't want it. They didn't want Contact and Allegra and Alka-Seltzer. They wanted Chinese herbs. And there are people there said, they don't want your stuff. They want Chinese herbs. Well, what is it? So that's how they got to that point, but they haven't gone over to actually get into manufacturing. However, in China, the biggest pharmaceutical manufacturer, you got to understand, this company is as big as any pharmaceutical company in the world, at least in terms of drugs manufactured, called Sangio. Sangio went into herbs. They started making all the classical formulas, because there was a market for it. Now, herbs in China now is very highly regulated. Anything that's been in there before 2004 is okay, is in, grandfather. But after 2004, if you want to create a new medicine, you have to prove to them that it works. You have to show studies that it does something. And a lot of the newer medicines are very focused on problems. Hemorrhoids, uterine fibroids, thyroiditis, they're very focused, whereas the classical formulas were very broad, would be used for lots of different problems on food. The newer problems are more disease and symptom oriented, whereas the older classical formulas were more differentiation oriented. Here's just a background. So that's classical formulas. Modern formulas started in the 1950s when, as part of the communist campaign to involve people in things, they did big medical campaigns. And one of the things they said is to little villages, what do you have herbally that we should know about? What do you have herbal formula-wise that we should know about? And they would publish this information and just make it available to doctors throughout the country. So a doctor in Harbin would see, oh, these guys got this herb in Guangxi that looks really interesting. So they write to them and get this stuff. Or a hospital in Guangxi would say, we have this formula for menopause using some local herbs. And everybody would go, wow, that's interesting. I want to get me some of that, you know. And so there's tremendous infusion of new herbs and new formulas on the market starting in the 1950s. And these are modern formulas, what I call modern formulas. They usually came from some experienced doctor and some with a reputation in a hospital, and they'd be so fantastic that a local company would start manufacturing it, and then you have a patent medicine that's on the market. So my book, you know, there are about 300 classical formulas in use today. If you look at Eddie Ellis's book, he'll talk about 300 formulas. But my book had 850 formulas. So what are those other formulas? 500 formulas, new formulas, new herbs, especially in the antiviral department, herbs that just aren't in any of the classical literature. So fantastic stuff. That's in my book. All those formulas are in my book. If you custom prescribe, my book has lots of ideas with ingredient percentages of how to treat certain problems. It's a great way to see what people are doing in China today. Now, I'm working on another book. It won't be ready for a year from now, but it's called 210 Important Formulas. So revamping the whole book and bringing it down to 210 important formulas, classical and modern, that I think are the most important. These are 50, but I would reduce it to about 210 that I think are really important for everybody to have. That book will not be out for a year, but that's where it's going. This book has everything. This book's sort of like a big reference book. You know, when I say this book, what I'm talking about, the red and yellow book. You should look at that. If you don't have it, Andrew has it for sale. So modern formulas are fantastic. You're dealing with real people with real problems that really have clinical significance. They're great formulas. You know, especially for menopause. I mean, menopausally, the classical stuff is not that strong. Using products versus customizing formulas. The pros and cons. I mean, in chronic conditions, you may or may not want to customize the formula, or you may find something off the shelf that works for you. In my practice, okay, and I can do both. I have 500 products in my pharmacy, 500 different manufactured Chinese herbal products. And about half my patients will get something off the shelf. About half my patients get something customized. When I customize now, we do it as powders. I use KPC powders, and I mix them up and shake them up and give it to them. I used to make alcohol extracted tinctures, and that's because I had an herbalist who would do that for me. I faxed her a formula. She brought back the formula in 2 days. You had to wait 2 days. Patient compliance was great. But she moved to Ohio, so I stopped doing that, and we went to the powders. Powders take really little shelf space. You know, I use 250 herbs when I customize, and I can get them in an area like that. But I also have 250 raw herbs, because I still make tinctures. Yeah.
Cost per day, patient?
On my pricing, I charge $35 for a 100-gram bottle. In that 100-gram bottle are 28 doses. So most patients get 2 doses a day. So you got 2 weeks. You know, is that right? Yeah. I give 3 or 4. I like to give about 4 spoons of the dose. It's better if they take them 3. The reason I don't give them 3 is nobody will do it. Nobody, unless they're hurting. Unless they're really suffering, they'll do it. But most people will not do it. So you gotta get it done in 2 doses. And the people that are really lame, I say, take it when you get up and take it before you go to bed. If they're pills, leave them in your bathroom. Take them before you go to bed, take them when you get up. Now, you can't believe poor compliance. I tell patients, the herbs work so much better if you swallow them. You can't put them under the pillow, and absorb it.
They taste so bad.
Pills don't taste bad.
No, the granules do.
Correct. I have them mix it with any sweetener they want. Sugar, honey, maple syrup, stevia. But basically I say, make it like a shot glass, bolt it down, have some water. It's done. They used to tell people to put it on their tongue. That's cruel. That's cruel. About half will get customized, half will get pills. With pills, I'm comfortable giving 2 products at a time. But if I think they need more than 2, I'll make it myself. It's just too much. It confuses the body, that many herbs. The other rule of thumb is you can do adjoining burners, but don't do upper burner and lower burner at the same time because the body's getting 2 different medicines. You can't take a bladder formula and a lung formula at the same time because the body's splitting the energy. When you take an herbal formula, it acts like one whole thing. It's like one herb. As far as the body's concerned, it's one herb. It's got one energy, one direction, one effect, It really becomes one thing. So you want to focus the attack. If you want to do or need to do 2 different burners separated by time. Don't take them at the same time. So most people don't customize. Number 1 reason, not enough skill. Number 2 reason, poor patient compliance. So everybody's left to products. Now, good news, bad news, there's like 1,500 products out there. If you go to my document, who's got what, there's 1,500 products on there. I don't say what's in them or what they're for, only by category. For menstrual cramps, here's a list of products. It's up to you to go on the website or get their catalog. Find out what's in it, how to use it. I'm just listing it, so you can say, oh yeah, I got that. I can use that, I got that. So we come back to products are very convenient. Now some people say, well, the products are so weak, they don't do anything. That's not true. I know this. I've been using products since 1980. It's not true, but it's dosage dependent. You have to raise the dosage from what they say on the packaging. Now, the best way to do that is to have a gram scale